last few days in some of the areas around Boston. And now today we are in Boston. And this is, of course, our first time here. The first thing that we did is we went down to the Boston Tea Party experience, which, granted, it was a little cheesy. Okay, I mean, it's like reenactors and they're trying to get you into it. I had a speaking part in part of it. But anyway, but it's a lot of fun and you do learn a lot about the Boston Tea Party. And, even for somebody like me, who's a teacher, who I've been teaching about the Boston Tea Party for many years, going on the ship, granted a replica right near where this all played out. And yes, throwing a tea into the water aggressively. I still learned some things and it put it into some perspective. Like one of the things that they talked about was the fact that, these chests of tea were extremely heavy and they were watertight. And so they were lined, so they were not super easy to break into, and they had to be lifted up onto the main deck using block and tackle. It's just some of the logistics that I never really thought about with the Boston Tea Party that maybe I should have, but I hadn't. But doing that experience kind of helped me see that. And one of the cool things there as well is they actually have the only surviving chest from those many chests of tea, the 340 that were thrown over. There's one that was passed down through a family for many, many, many years, and they have it there at that Boston Tea Party experience and museum. Another interesting thing too is, this whole block and tackle thing I was talking about, one of the men was actually hit. The rope was severed. He was hit in the head by the block and they thought he was dead and were preparing to bury him, only to discover that he had survived the next day. So it's kind of an interesting and fun story from the Boston Tea Party. Now, after that, we did one of our favorite things to do when we go to a city, and that is to do like some kind of a walking tour, preferably like a food and walking tour. That's what we had, this food and history tour. Our tour guide, Alex, was amazing. And it was great because it's a great way to get to know the city a little bit, to maybe discover some things that, I'd like to come back and see this site in more detail, or I'd like to come back to this restaurant. Here's a great place to eat. And she gave us a lot of good recommendations. We got to eat, we started in the North End, so we got to eat some great Italian food in the North End. That's what it's known for. We got to try some modern pastry. It's the big debate, Mike's pastry versus modern pastry. The locals apparently believe modern pastry. That's what we got to have. It was great. And then we got to see a lot of sites. We, went to Faneuil Hall. We went to the Old North Church and got to see where, that was where the lanterns were hung on the night of, Paul Revere's famous Midnight Ride. And it was cool to see those things in person. We also took a little bit of a walk around Beacon Hill. We saw the old State House and the new State House. Before we went to Beacon Hill, the old State House, of course, is the site of the Boston Massacre. It was cool. And one of the things, of course, we did here at the end, you can see over here is Commonwealth Avenue. This is where we finished up the day. It's a great place to finish up the day. Beautiful. You've got this tree-lined promenade, and there are some statues of some famous, important individuals. There's an Alexander Hamilton statue. And then, of course, we ended in a great spot, the statue of John Glover. And I know you already heard about John Glover when we went to Salem and Marblehead. But to me, he's one of those classic, underrated figures in American history. And so it's cool to see John Glover again. He's the one that was in charge of the crossing of the Delaware, among other things, but that's probably what he's most famous for. He's the one that managed that and, of course, got Washington's men across the Delaware River for the Battle of Trenton. There was one really funny thing that happened today, too, that I need to bring up. So, we're on this tour. It's a small group. We had talked about how I'm a teacher. That came up a few different times, and that was kind of a fun thing about the tour. And then the tour guide, mentioned, hey, these duck boat tours are kind of cool. You might want to try to do that. She's like, I remember doing it as a kid, and we'd make, a duck quacking sound. So one of them comes by, and my lovely wife, Mrs. Lewis, decides to quack at the boat. And then the guy that was doing the tour in the boat starts bantering with us a little bit. And then we're kind of walking away, and all of a sudden I hear he says my name and teacher from Arizona. And I'm like, what in the world? How in the world? One of my former students was actually, from Arizona. Here we are in Boston. From Arizona, was on the boat and waving at me, takes a picture of me down there on the street. That was actually pretty cool. So that was fun to see. And anyway, it was a great day. And I really do recommend that. Any city that you go to, do a food tour, do a walking tour, or like we did, a food and history tour combo. And that way you get a little bit of a sense of the city, and you'll find some things that you might want to come back and see, and places you might want to come back to and eat. Tomorrow, day 2.